Daniel, do you take my point that the narrative seems to be being altered even while the aftershocks of it are still reverberating through society?
I think we're starting to see that. I mean, I went into the House of Lords in the middle of lockdown, so I had no opportunity to vote on the original legislation. But I was asked to vote on these different, new regulations that came in from time to time, and I duly did, although I had some protests about them that I mentioned. But I'm absolutely... So I was vaguely uncertain, but I've absolutely reached the view in the last 6 or 8 months that we should never, ever have a lockdown again, whatever the circumstances. A mandatory lockdown. People will lock down. People who are vulnerable and worried will lock themselves down to some extent, and I understand that, and they're free to do so. But I don't think we can ever afford it. The cost of it, not just to the economy, but in mental health, education, all the other things that we've seen, is simply intolerable. And it's very hard to say that it actually really worked in any serious sense. So I would be totally opposed to it. We're going to have this inquiry. I don't know whether it's going to look at these issues, which issues it will look at. It's also true the government took unprecedented powers without proper parliamentary scrutiny during that period because it used a piece of legislation which allowed it to do that.
Shouldn't there be at the very least, before the same people tell us that they're going to fix it, shouldn't there be a coming forward and admitting to culpability and responsibility, to acknowledge damage done and hurt inflicted, even before they start embarking on a cure?
The difficulty there, Neil, is that an awful lot of people out there still argue that the government should have locked down harder and earlier. It's not the case that everyone accepts that.
Jeremy Hunt did, but a lot of other people didn't want lockdowns.
It's not the case that everyone accepts that the lockdown was a mistake. I think it was. You think it was. But a lot of people still think it was the right thing to do, and they will defend it. And they have a big audience out there of supporters amongst ordinary people, electors and voters, who actually think it was the right thing to do. Now, they're going to start seeing the bill for it in a couple of weeks' time, when we get a budget revealed, which will show that the way we've chosen to deal with it. I think there were other ways of dealing with it, and better ways, but the way Conservative MPs want to deal with it appears to be through higher taxes and less public spending. So they'll see that, and that will be the cost of doing it. But never forget how much support it actually had, and how much people are still criticising Boris for not locking down a week or two earlier, which would have made no difference either way.